So Austria won't have Western Europe's first far-right head of state since World War II, not this time. But it took the counting of a record number of absentee ballots for the former head of the Green Party, Alexander Van der Bellem, to edge the Freedom Party's Nobert Hofer, both sides treating it like a victory. And certainly, the first-round elimination of the mainstream center-left and center-right parties has proved a political tsunami that the whole continent will long remember. Part of this has to do with Austria itself, a nation where the far-right's often been in coalition governments, and that still elected former UN Secretary General Kurt Waldheim after it came to light that he lied about his past as a Nazi intelligence officer in Greece during World War II. But it's clear that there's also a leadership crisis in Europe. After the Euro crisis, the refugee crisis, ahead of a Brexit referendum, will nationalists continue to go from strength to strength? Is it the beginning of the end for a European Union founded to prevent the nation-state rivalries that led to two world wars? Today in the France 24 debate, we're seeing how the far right is getting warmer. And with us, joining us is Alexis Poulain, director of Euractiv France. Remind us again, Euractiv, news website in how many languages?
We're in 12 languages in 12 EU countries, covering EU affairs, but national affairs as well.
Also with us, we'll be joined from Vienna by Barbara Kolm. She's advisor to Norbert Hofer and the Freedom Party and director at the Austrian Economics Center. Thank you for being with us. Political scientist Flu Perlot of the Institute for Strategic Analysis also joins us from Vienna. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And from Berlin, Timo Lochotsky, who follows far-right movements at the German Marshall Fund think tank. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Hi.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Austria won't have a far-right president, but it was indeed close. 50.3%, the winning margin for the 72-year-old Van der Bellem, an economics professor who is the pro-EU son of refugees.
This election has affected everybody in Austria. No one has remained indifferent. The result means that I have even greater responsibility as the next president of the Republic of Austria, yes, but this responsibility also befits Norbert Hofer.
Yeah, the statements there by Alexander Van der Bellem after winning by a mere 31,000 votes. He talked about a country that was polarized, the need for a culture of political dialogue, and a call for mutual respect. Flu Perlot, your reaction to the first remarks by the president-elect?
Yeah, I think it's no surprise that he took these words and tried to extend his arm after a quite long campaign which polarized the country and which led to many quarrels, even between friends, even within families, about who to elect and which road to follow. So the next logical step for the elected president can only be to try to unify and to try to restore some debate culture to Austria.
Barbara Kolm, this call for mutual respect, what did you think of his first remarks, and will the FPÖ, your party, pick up on him?
Well, I mean, it's a question of mutual respect has been shown by Mr. Hofer throughout the entire campaign. And we've seen a very, tight win. And eventually, it's almost 50%. 49.7% of the people who voted for Mr. Hofer. So I think he is aware of that. And I think what the main parties who are in government should be aware is that there is definitely a desire for change within the Austrian people. So definitely the new president will have to unite. He will have to be very neutral. He will have to be open. And of course, he will have to address also the questions that were thrown into the discussion by Mr. Hofer during the campaign.
All right, even before the results had been announced, Nobert Hofer, who, by the way, said he would have dissolved parliament and triggered a snap election. Now the far right in Austria says it'll bide its time until parliament has been renewed, and that'll have to happen sometime before the end of 2018.
It doesn't matter how the result turns out, whether Hofer will now be president or not, but it's simply a milestone to achieve so much.
I feel like this is a turning point for all of Europe. We are very happy.
Alexis Poulain, you heard Barbara Culm, a very narrow, very close election. You heard those voters there. Should there be a snap election, or should there be the Freedom Party in the next government in Austria?
Well, there'll be election coming next, and surely the Freedom Party will have a landslide there, I guess. If they don't have this key position, it looks like the country is divided half between people voting for Freedom Party and half being a coalition. I don't think it's only Green voters that elected the new president. So the stronger base there for the next majority in the parliament will be surely coming from the Freedom Party.
You're saying there'll be elections? There'll be elections soon, you think?
I think, no, they will follow the agenda. I don't think the president will call elections. There's no need for that. And people can buy their time and see what's going to happen. There might be an ongoing campaign. I don't know how Hofer will position itself after this defeat, but surely strong, because the win is not that a big win. And for all the extreme right movement in Europe, it is another win, another milestone to seizing the power in European countries.
Timo Lashoshki, at the end of the day, is it a win for the far right?
Well, that's a very good question. I strongly doubt that. In fact, I think that what we see in Austria is that the scope conditions for the far right have been perfect. You have a weak Grand coalition government, you have been talking about immigration, the European question, and national identity. So all these factors are given which should be beneficial to the far right. And in this very climate, they do not face a very solid candidate from the center, but they face, say, a politically extreme from the Greens, you might say from the far left in this respect. And in this very discursive setting where everything speaks in favor of the far right, in fact, the far right cannot carry the win back home. So in fact, I do think this might be the perfect situation for the far right. The far right in Austria could not capitalize on.
Well, you're saying that they've hit their upper limit?
Well, I'm not suggesting that. However, I want to point out that if you have a look at far right-wing movements all across Europe, you see there are certain factors benefiting the electoral rise and others leading or hampering their advances. And all the factors benefiting the far right have been present in Austria the last 3 or 4 years. And it might as well be that these factors turn around in the coming years and months, and that this might indeed have been a moment for the far right in Austria where the perfect ground were there for them and they couldn't seize their opportunity.
So a possible turning point. Barbara Culm, your reaction?
I don't think that, first of all, I think one needs to clarify that the Freedom Party is a center-right party and not a far-right party. And I think this should be should be really stated. The problem was, or still is in Austria, that the governing party...
I'm sorry, you're saying it's a center-right party, but your leaders have said that, for instance, that Islam has no place in Austria?
Well, I mean, these are simple words.
Barbara, unfortunately, we're losing the audio sound. We're going to try to reconnect with you there in Vienna because we're losing the audio quality. Flou Perlot, is the Freedom Party a center-right party or a far-right party?
Party, I think the view that they are center-right is what they want to portray themselves and what they hope they can portray themselves by winning the president and the office of the president, so they could appear as a mainstream party. But of course, they have moved into the mainstream, more to the middle, but only because they have broadened their electorate, and they managed that many of their issues are broadly discussed in Austria. So they could shape a little bit of the agenda here. But I want to point out one thing, and we shouldn't forget that this was a runoff election between 2 candidates. So it was a polarized situation by this alone. And I wouldn't go so far to say now there were 50% voting for the FPÖ and 50% voting for the Greens. In fact, many voters, a majority said they voted for their candidate to avoid, to prevent the other one from winning. And this is a sign for me that this is a very special situation. And I would agree with my colleague there that said that the circumstances are very, very special and were very good for the Freedom Party. And it's not so sure that this would be the same in a general election.
Timo Laszewski, how far to the right is the FPÖ?
Well, I do think the FPÖ party it's difficult to judge based on the terms. Far right is indicative of various things in the Western European context. I rather prefer the term right-wing populist. Right-wing populist parties, as the FPÖ, they are coined by certain characteristics, by certain features. And the most important one is that they are anti-establishment, against the established elites, and they want to propose, or they're proposing solutions how to basically reshape the nation based on the idea of the imagined community, how it was standing 30 years ago. And all these features you most certainly find with the FPÖ. The FPÖ, I do think, is thus a classic right-wing populist party in Western Europe, very well comparable to the AfD in Germany, the Partij voor de Vrijheid in the Netherlands, or the Sweden Democrats in Sweden.
Back in 2012, it turned out that French far-right leader Marine Le Pen attended something called the Pan-Germanists Ball. It's in the company of her partner from the National Front, Louis Alliot. The Pan-Germanists started out as a student fraternity at Ixy-Poulain, nostalgic for the days of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Yeah,
this was picked up on by the French press at the time.
Yes, and she and Marine Le Pen actually had to sort of apologize for being there, because this ball is a meetup of right-wing populists, and you could say even further on the right, more extreme people. So it was not a great turnout photo opportunity for Marine Le Pen, who wants to be seen as a strong right leader in France now. And you see, they discussed at the time the change of the name of Parti National, Front National, to change the name and kill the image of the father, who were more extreme and more old-fashioned.
But again, we're trying to figure out who exactly are the leaders of the Freedom Party, and what is the strain of populists that they are.
Well, they all have the same speech. If you look at Front National, at UKIP, or anything, is we have to go back between our boundaries, put back more walls. We have to have a sort of a nation, core nation, with a bit of religion there, being we are Christian. There's always something about Islam. And also, in terms of economic program, it's liberalism and protectionism. So both you open, you have a very free market, but at the same time protect the goods and the people, and try to sell that to actually the people voting for these parties. We were discussing this are not in the cities. There are people in the countryside or small cities, workers, factory workers. So you see the divide here. There's a class option in populism, basically selling these ideas to people that are more conservative in ways of approaching politics or change, the world change.
We're pleased to welcome back Barbara Kalman. Again, apologies for the technical issues we had earlier on. You were saying that it is not a far-right party. You were qualifying it as a center-right party, and the question we put to you earlier was, in that case, why does it make statements like Islam has no place in Austria?
Well, in Austria, radical Islam. I think there are questions that we need to address as well. But most importantly, I think one also has to look carefully at fearmongers who claim that they are a radical ultra-right party want to address. I think it's actually the fear by those people that they are losing power. They now find out eventually that they have lost or run out of time, because they could have done reforms, structural reforms that definitely needed, not only in Austria, but also in Europe. And this is exactly what the Freedom Party has also addressed, that Europe, yes, they are a European, they are pro-Europe, but also they want Europe to reform and not also continue on the same path. I mean, we have changed in Europe. There are paradigm shifts in the new millennium that we need to address, and the old policies of the last millennium cannot go on. There are new challenges, new threats to Europe that need to be addressed, but they have not been addressed by the parties in Austria. And so this.
We seem to be losing the connection again, but Barbara Komm, let me ask you on that point. You talk about new challenges. I see that recently in an interview with Italian newspaper La Repubblica, the leader of the party, Heinz Christian Strache, said, "I want to heal existing wounds and give Tyrol the opportunity to reunite." He's calling for a referendum for southern Tyrol to rejoin Austria. Do you believe in changing the boundaries of Europe to reflect the old Austro-Hungarian Empire? All right, we seem to have lost the connection there with Vienna. We'll try to reconnect with Barbara Komm. Timo Lochotsky, let me ask you on that point. This appeal to German speakers in Italy to rejoin Austria, what does that tell you?
Well, I do think this is a nice indication of how right-wing populist parties try to garner electoral support. They, as we just outlined previously, European voters find themselves surrounded by unbearable, incomprehensible threats, and they want European leaders to make sense of the world which is coined by complexity and things they cannot comprehend. And here, right-wing populist parties, they don't offer a compelling, complicated narrative. What they offer instead is they refer to national nostalgia. They say, well, let's just rewind the wheel of history. Let's just turn back to how things used to be 30, 40, or in this respect, even 100 years ago. So this is something we shouldn't take serious as an issue in itself, but rather as an attempt to kind of downplay the complexity of today in offering simple solutions, alleged solutions, very important, alleged solutions, in just offering European voters the illusion, let's just turn back the wheel of time and everything will be fine again.
Flu Perlot, do you agree? Is that how the FPÖ sees things?
Yeah, that's a big part of it, I think. But another point may be that it's kind of, I wouldn't say trick, but a strategy of political communication that right-wing populist parties and the FPÖ especially is trying to use. They test out boundaries. They try to break those boundaries, try to cause a scandal or something like that. And in this way, they get the time in the media, in the public, and then they can paint themselves as the victims. Everybody is against them. The media is against them. There's a political outcry. How could you ask for reunification of southern and northern Tyrol and something like that? And then suddenly they have the split in society between us and them, between what they call the elite and us, the people. This is also a narrative we have seen in the general election now, because Hofer, the candidate of the Freedom Party, always tried to paint Alexander Van der Bellem as member of the establishment, member of the old party structure, member of the old system. And he himself is one being with the people and talking with the people and understanding the problems of the people. And they try to, I wouldn't say overthrow, but they try to tell the elites that their rule is over and now we can take matters in our own hands again.
All right, they fell short by 31,000 votes, but will it be the case in other elections elsewhere in Europe? Stay with us. The France 24 debate continues.